And people will continue coming in. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I'm delighted to welcome you to today's webinar on masculinities and engaging men for gender equality, which is hosted by my office, the UNDP Independent Evaluation Office. I'm Isabel Mercy, and I'm the director here. This webinar is part of our series of reflections. These are concise knowledge products that try to distill lessons from past evaluations through rapid evidence assessments. In the case of this specific reflection, we're delighted to have collaborated with the UN Women Independent Evaluation Service, and we're able to tap into their rich knowledge and research on the topic. Of course, their insights have been invaluable in shaping the paper and today's discussion. I'm very pleased that they're joining us here and that they were partners along the journey of this reflections. Gender equality is a topic very dear to my heart as a woman, as a mother, as a feminist, and more broadly, as someone who firmly believes that true progress is only possible when we all moved forward together. Historically, gender equality initiatives have focused primarily on empowering women and girls. And of course, this is really important and remains essential even today, but we can't achieve lasting change without the active participation of men and boys. Their engagement in this journey is crucial. Their roles, actions, and understanding can either reinforce the barriers that hold us back or help break them down. By including men and boys in the conversation, we can address the root causes of inequalities such as toxic masculinity, gender-based violence, and unequal power dynamics within household and communities. Engaging men and boys is also fundamental to foster a more inclusive approach to gender equality, where everyone shares a responsibility to create a fairer society. When men and boys understand and support the benefits of gender equality, they become allies in promoting respectful relationships, equitable division of labor, and supportive environments for women and girls to thrive. This collaborative effort empowers women, and it enriches the lives of men and boys by freeing them from restrictive gender roles and expectations. So, involving men and boys in gender equality initiative creates a more balanced and harmonious society where all individuals can reach their full potential, regardless of their sex. I'm really, really happy to be joined here today by Raquel Lagunas, head of the UNDP Gender Equality Team, and by two colleagues from the UN Women Regional Office in the Arab States, Chaitali Chattopadhyay, Regional Evaluation Specialist, and Rodrigo Montero, Regional Program Manager. My colleague, Tae-Young Kim, who is an IEO synthesis specialist, has kindly accepted to present the reflections paper. Stepping in as the author of the paper, our colleague Anna Kunova has only just returned from her maternity leave a couple of days ago. And after Tae-Young's presentation and the contributions by Chaitali and Rodrigo, I'll give the floor to Raquel for her comments and insights before opening the floor to anyone in the audience who wishes to contribute. And I do encourage you to ask questions and share comments. My colleague Vijaya Vadivelu, who is the Chief of Corporate and Thematic Evaluations, will moderate the discussion. Tae-Young, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Isabel. Let me just try to share the screen. Do you guys see my screen? Do you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, we do, Tae-Young.
Yes, we do.
Yes, Tae-Young.
Okay. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Tae-Young Kim, presenting this paper on behalf of my colleague Anna Kunova. In the next 10 minutes or so, I'd like to share with you the key lessons from our reflections paper on masculinities and engaging men for gender equality. These lessons have been synthesized by reviewing around 60 evaluations, most of which were carried out by UNDP-IO or commissioned by individual country offices. So What do we mean exactly when we say working with men and boys for gender equality? Well, it starts with the notion that social norms and structures define gender roles in a society, often limiting the agency of individuals. Thus, achieving gender equality is simply impossible without involving men and boys, and they themselves should examine their roles in the society, communities, and cultures they're part of to understand how their role influences the lives of women and girls. And to support this, we UNDP have been trying to involve men and boys in our gender equality portfolio, focusing on gender based violence, women's economic empowerment, and political participation, among other issues. It's also particularly relevant to our partnership building, as it involves close partnerships with other UN agencies, especially UN Women and UNFPA, as they focus on promoting shared responsibility for reproductive health, parenting, and domestic work. So, with this in mind, we reviewed around 60 evaluations and formulated 6 lessons, 3 of which are rather general as they deal with a holistic approach and the need to look beyond the individual or household level to include the broader community level to achieve gender transformative results. In so doing, this paper discusses factors like gender dynamics, the underlying roots of men's behavior, economic stressors, and partnering with women's rights organizations for design and implementation of gender initiatives. The 3 remaining lessons are, I would say, more interesting and also specific as they provide the how aspect of achieving gender equality. They discuss the influence of peer groups and role models to men and boys, the meaning of fatherhood to men, and how they start to consider gender equality seriously as they become a father to a child, and the influence of religious organizations on gender equality and their limits. In today's webinar, I'm going to talk about these last 3 lessons, but I'd like to strongly encourage everyone to visit our website and read the full paper for all the lessons we've found. So I won't go into too much details here, but this section just talks about how we defined and used these 4 main terms in this paper. Again, I'll skip through the first 3 lessons today, but still wanted to show you how this paper looks overall. Please do read them on your own as they provide the background and general knowledge of social norms, gender equality, and engaging men at the broader community level. And as you can see here, each lesson contains country examples or success stories. So just skipping through. Okay. So the first lesson for today says the engagement of men and boys has been successfully facilitated by fostering peer-based connections, creating safe, non-judgmental spaces, and involving role models. This lesson demonstrates the fact that we humans are social beings. Men and boys are no exception, as we've all seen they're rather easily affected by their male friends, peers, or someone they love or respect. Evidence suggests that their concept of masculinities, gender roles, and behaviors can and do change by such groups. Thus, it is critical to build healthy, respectful, and equitable relationships with peers throughout the term of an engagement program and even beyond. We notice the significance of establishing safe spaces for men and boys where they can transparently share their experience on gender issues, including difficulties and vulnerabilities in conforming to or defying their expected gender role in the society, a household, or in a relationship. So the interaction even further improved in the presence of a facilitator who ensured a non judgmental style of communication and promoted transparency and comfort in the group. The impact of change also grew further when the message of gender equality came from someone famous, such as role models, celebrities, sports stars, politicians, and other leaders of a society. Quite often, influential community gender equality champions also engaged with men and boys and provided guidance on gender successfully. We found a couple of success stories from Jamaica and Mali, where the Spotlight Initiative established safe spaces for men and boys to discuss and explore gender equality together with women, to address domestic violence, raise rights of women and girls, and became really a force for change. And the second lesson here says, while fatherhood has served as a strategic entry point to engage men for gender equality, it also has limitations. I personally found this next lesson also interesting because similar to the early feminists who believed that women, as mothers and caregivers, had an important but distinctive role to play in society and in politics under the name of maternal feminism, men, when they become fathers, they also tend to consider gender equality more seriously, according to evaluations we analyzed. And evidence suggests that they not only become more interested in the topic of gender equality, but also tend to be willing to participate in gender initiatives more actively than before, because they now begin to see the benefits of gender equality for both men and women while addressing men in a positive way as a promoter of gender equality for their children and not as a potential perpetrators. Thus, we can say that working with fathers is a natural path to ending cycles of violence. And in so doing, a household becomes a center place of gender equality. And perhaps because of this, we witnessed easy buy ins for this approach, even from conservative societies and governments. But however, evaluations also found limitations in this approach, as a focus on fatherhood had difficulties in challenging patriarchal power structures in the family and couldn't stop men from engaging in traditional male guardianship or their presumed entitlement to dominate women. In a regional UN Women Initiative, feminist groups and women's organizations raised concerns that this approach just further strengthened heteronormative dynamics and even risked stigmatizing single mothers and their children. And as a successful intervention case, using fatherhood as an entry point to engaging men, in Georgia, a joint UNDP, UNFPA, and UN Women initiative had a huge success through a media campaign on the role of fathers. It became so popular that participating journalists even developed their own campaign called Daddy, Read Me a Book, and continued beyond the initial UN initiative. Last but not least, the next lesson here says, many initiatives have strongly benefited from engaging with faith-based organizations, which can be powerful agents of social change, although they often foster patriarchal views. Our evaluations found the critical role played by religious organizations in promoting gender equality or changing man's behavior of toxic masculinities. Given their huge influence in the lives of overall populations in a society, including men and boys, we found that these faith-based institutions are one of the most powerful agents of social changes. And evidence taught us that working with religious leaders on gender, usually to end gender-based violence, is a good practice to bring about changes in behavior of men and boys. These interventions involving religious institutions often used arguments from the religion, such as stories from Prophet Muhammad's life, to promote gender equality. However, we also did find some limitations in this approach, as these institutions are basically based on patriarchal traditions and views, thus encountering conservative pushback from them. So, for instance, they opposed laws penalizing gender based violence, or they sometimes endorsed female genital mutilation. So, the discrepancies between the proposed gender initiatives and pre existing traditional religious doctrines collided quite often. Potential ways to address this complexity includes expanding the length of engagement to maximize a chance for their buy-ins, or involving female religious leaders to promote advocacy. And as a success case, we found that in Kosovo and Georgia, UNFPA established a partnership with religious leaders from both Orthodox Christian and Muslim communities to condemn conflict-related sexual violence in their constituencies. So with this, I'll stop here. Thank you so much for your attention. In addition to this paper, you can also visit our Reflections website for other papers, including the upcoming ones. Thank you so much.
The next speaker can come in. Is Chaitali.
Thank you, everyone, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on which part of the world you are. So I'm the Regional Evaluation Specialist from UN Women, and very happy to be here with my colleague, Rodrigo. Both of us will take turns to talk about some of the good practices and case studies that are coming from UN Women evaluations in this subject matter. So let me first start off by underscoring that UN Women has made an explicit commitment towards promoting positive social norms. And the current strategic plan of UN Women has introduced a dedicated systemic outcome to look into social norms change or positive social norms change. And engaging with men and boys is an integral element of promoting positive social norms. Today, I'm going to talk about 3 interesting case studies coming from different parts of the world that reflects and substantiates what was presented so far on some of the emerging lessons from the reflection series. So the first case study comes from Egypt, and it's coming from the Safe Cities program evaluation. The Safe Cities program intended to create safe public space, neighborhoods and communities in Cairo, specifically in the Cairo city. And engagement with men and boys was again a dedicated element of this program. In this respect, the program engaged with tuk-tuk drivers, as you can see the image, in order to create awareness on violence against women. And the intention was to make them agents of change in the public sphere as well as in the communities. And the tuk-tuk drivers were quite involved, and once they were convinced about their role in ending violence against women, they would put up a poster in their tuk-tuk saying, "My tuk-tuk is safe, free from harassment and addiction." So by and large, the evaluative evidence indicated that engagement with men, particularly with the tuk-tuk driver, was effective because there was an awareness, there was also a commitment and some specific actions taken from their end. However, there was a pertinent limitation that the evaluative evidence indicated, which was the approach or the narrative used by the intervention. It relied mostly on paternalistic guardianship principles and patriarchal norms, to a large extent, therefore, reinforcing the gender stereotypes. Some of them also faced occasional criticism from their peers and backlash from the community members for being advocate for women. And the program was not really prepared to deal with some of these unplanned, unintended backlash. Therefore, working with men may unintentionally reinforce gender inequality, stereotypes, or certain gender or social norms if they do not incorporate a feminist approach centered on the redistribution of power, resources, and opportunities. My second case study comes from Ethiopia, and this was a part of the feminist collaborative evaluation on UN Women's approach to social norms change. And this particular case study deals with the involvement of faith-based institutions to address the issue of violence against women and girls. We found this intervention particularly effective, and there are certain reasons behind it. The first one, as you can see, that the institution did quite a comprehensive analysis of the context, the power brokers, and in a way was underpinned by the socio-ecological and social relations approach. So before they went into designing the intervention, they were quite cognizant that there are many power brokers in the sphere of intending to change the social norms around violence against women. And religious institution indeed came up as an important power broker. The project particularly took a more comprehensive approach towards engaging with these religious or faith-based institutions. Instead of just intending to use them to send a message, they engaged with the institution itself and promoted supporting self-reflection within the institution, including theological reflection. It used the existing structures and mechanisms of the faith institutions, such as by integrating ending violence against women and girls and positive masculinity in the theological curriculum, into the work plans of the churches, into the faith-based schools curriculum, into the pre-marriage counseling and conflict management modules for households. It also intentionally looked into interfaith engagement and sensitizing religious leaders of the existing faith, which was primarily Christianity and Islam, and coordinating a common platform. It also made use of faith-based media to communicate about the messages around ending violence against women and girls. As a result, there were much more openness to discuss about very sensitive issues such as intimate partner violence and domestic violence. There was a wide reach that was achieved through the faith-based institutions, and there were gender desks that were established in the religious structure. So while it addressed directly the social norms around or challenging the social norms around violence against women and girls, it also indirectly addressed the patriarchy within the religious structure. So we found that this was quite a good example. The third case study comes from Lebanon through the evaluation of a regional program called Men and Women for Gender Equality. And this was the phase 2 evaluation of this program. And this particular case study reinforced the message that the interventions involving men and boys need to go beyond individuals and households and really engage with key institutions. So the case in point here is Lebanon's work with the anti-sexual harassment issue. While at the micro level, the program worked and engaged with men and boys, community-based organizations, feminist organizations, and communities to sensitize them and advocate for anti-sexual harassment issue. At the macro level, the program contributed to passing of the bill on anti-sexual harassment issue by working with feminist organizations and their networks, as well as with the National Commission for Lebanese Women. At the meso level, once the law was passed, the program worked to operationalize the law, such as by engaging with the employers, the Lebanese League for Women in Business, other community-based organizations. And one of the results that was noted by the evaluation was, as a result of this engagement, 13 employers adopted anti-sexual harassment policies in their workplace. So these are the 3 case studies I wanted to talk about. I'm going to pass it over to Rodrigo, my colleague now, to talk about his reflections based on his work on the program of Men and Women for Gender Equality. Over to you.
Thank you, Chaitali, and thank you, colleagues from UNDP as well. And it's a pleasure to be here. Good day to all of you. So first, to say where I speak from, I'm working at the regional program, which is quite unique for young women in the Arab States region. It's called Dare to Care. But it's actually not the new program. We are now in the 3rd phase. And it's also a large program, as we've been allocating over $30 million during the last 9 years of the existence of the program. And one of the uniqueness of the program is that on purpose, as it's a pilot and flagship program, we invested on evaluation and monitoring, and we did not only have an external evaluation of the previous phase of the program, but also several evaluations of different initiatives of the program. But I would also like to highlight that at UN Women, we have a global community of practice on social norms, led by my colleague Paolo Chauhar, and also a global task force on transforming patriarchal masculinities, led by my colleague Hildur Sigurdardóttir. And through these two global platforms, we have also developed a number of principles and approaches to work with both on social norms and on principles to work on transforming patriarchal masculinities. And in this regional program, we have been also been part of these platforms, contributing and sharing with other colleagues from other regions. So when it comes to one of the key findings of the evaluation presented by our colleagues from UNDP, this holistic nature and the impactful approach that is needed in the successful programming on transforming patriarchal masculinities or promoting gender equitable masculinities, we can refer to that from different perspectives. So I think one is, of course, the holistic approach in terms of methodology. We need to work with individuals and families and communities, but we also need to look at broader impact in communities, in institutions, and in normative frameworks. And I think most of you may be familiar with the socio-ecological model, which is being applied in prevention of violence against women programs and also on health programs. And this is one of the key models that have been proven to be successful to transform social norms and masculinities. In the Arab region, we have transformed it in the way of a pyramid of results, which is following these different levels of the socio-ecological model. And we also are now implementing some signature interventions, which I'm not going to speak on detail, but these interventions build upon the lessons learned that we have generated in the program and documented as well. I would like to highlight that it's very important when working on masculinities that we consider these programs as strategic ways of expanding the resource base of the feminist and the women's movement, and that we also expand the constituencies. So it's very important to have in mind that we need to engage with unusual suspects, and by working with men, we are also open avenues for gender equality and women's empowerment. For instance, what we have done in the program is to influence the military in Lebanon. We established a gender equality office. We established a network of gender focal points within the Lebanese armed forces, thanks to the work done on masculinities through masculinity programming. Also, the work that Chaitali described with religious leaders. In Ethiopia, we have done similar work in the Arab region using the angle of masculinities. It's also very important to have, as much as possible, a good thematic focus, because masculinities can we have the risk of spreading too thin, talking about prevention of violence, talking about caregiving, talking about health related issues, HIV prevention. So it's very important, as much as possible, that the masculinity programming focuses on one thematic area. What we have done in my program, we were working in several of these areas. We are now working on caregiving and fatherhood, which leads to the next point. And this translates into also the different levels. So we are working at community-based level, using fatherhood and caregiving as an entry point, but we are also working to expand the care service provision on issues related to work-life balance and engagement of men in care work, and also on advocacy. We are working to influence laws and policies to promote the engagement of men in caregiving, including also paternity leave. So I think this is very important, because when we have this thematic focus, we can see increased impact at the different levels of the socio-ecological model. Also, in regards to another finding presented by UNDP in terms of the use of fatherhood and peer groups and role models, we know that fatherhood is both a goal on itself. It has multiple benefits for families, for children's well-being, educational attainment, health outcomes, etc. For men themselves, mental well-being, but also for women's empowerment and reducing the or redistributing the amount of unpaid care and domestic work. But it's very important that these interventions on itself do not necessarily lead to gender equality. They need to be intentional. So for instance, we had gender transformative parenting programs we had 14 modules in sessions spread over a period of 3 months. And these gender transformative parenting programs lead to the reduction of physical intimate partner violence in Palestine by 8%, as data that we got from women, not from men. And also it had improvement on attitudes related to violence against women. But why? Because 3 out of the 14 sessions on fatherhood or gender transformative parenting were explicitly focused on prevention of violence against women. So I think that's also very important. Again, as it was presented by colleagues, we have learned that, and we have utilized a lot of different techniques, art exhibition, sports, positive deviance, peer-to-peer, and we found that these two techniques, positive deviance and peer-to-peer, are the most successful techniques. Men and women from the same communities going to visit households, speaking to their peers, young people going to universities, high schools, speaking to young people, not teachers. We also learned that community-based interventions need to be at least 24 months of duration in order to see meaningful impact. It's very important that programming on masculinities it's accountable towards the feminist movement, and that this is not just a blah blah blah, and of course we are all aligned. This needs to be translated into concrete actions, and one of them is financing women's organizations. And many of women's organizations have already experience in delivering pedagogical approaches, interventions with young people, men and women, so they are also a repository of knowledge and experience. Very important programs on masculinities need also to target women, not only men alone. We need to look at the household as a whole. Sometimes when women are not engaged, there could be even some backlash, and also some women in contexts where women are working at home, they may feel undermined or that their role is not recognized if men suddenly would be willing to undertake domestic work. So we also need to be mindful of this. Some specific social groups, for instance, mothers-in-law, the mothers of the husbands, were a key stakeholder to engage in our community-based work in the rural Egypt, because they play a key role in reinforcing gender inequality and attitudes against the wives of the husband. So it's also very important to work outside of the household, this peer-to-peer approach, spaces where women and men socialize with peers. Like cafes, a sports club, etc. And also to have a strong focus on young men and young women. As you may know from global data from the images studies, younger generations of men are not necessarily more gender equitable than older generations. So it's very important to work with young people. And it's very promising because we also found through our evaluations that the changes in attitudes, behaviors of young men are higher, of course, because the baseline is lower too, than when working with adult men. So I think this is also important to have in mind. Again, impact at the scale, focusing, having increased investments in less geographical locales rather than in multiple locales spread into thin, and having also very important methodology for monitoring, not only quantitative methods, but also qualitative, as there is a lot of data and experiences that are not necessarily captured in the quantitative methods. And very important not to fall into the trap of only working with the allies, with those men who are in favor of gender equality, which of course it's an entry point when working on advocacy for legal reforms and working with religious leaders. We need to start with the allies, especially in the spaces where there is a strong resistance. But we need to especially target men who are in the movable middle, which are a huge percentage of the populations, and also work with over those men who are really against opposing to gender equality, and often, at least for the purpose of informing the messaging and the narratives to influence other men. And I have to say that fatherhood is precisely an interesting area of work because it allows us to work with different constituents with different ideologies. We can very easily appeal to conservative constituents who are talking about the preservation of the unity of the family or discrediting gender equality because it's a Western agenda. We can use the argument of men's caregiving to challenge those arguments, saying that it helps to enhance the well-being of children, reduce drug substance abuse of children, criminal offense. We even have very weak evidence from Nordic countries, but sometimes we use on conservative settings. It can reduce the divorce rates, having increased engagement of men in childcare and caregiving. So it of course having the intentional again approach of promoting gender equality of women's empowerment, and we can even use caregiving as a strategy for conflict prevention, which is also very relevant in our region with hate and militarized masculinities, etc. So I think it's very interesting, the issue of fatherhood, and yeah, I think I completed my time. Thank you very much, colleagues. Over.
Thank you so much, Chaitali Chattopadhyay and Rodrigo Montero, for sharing your insights and also practical examples from UN Women's programs at the country level. This is very important. May I now invite Raquel Lagunas, Director Gender Equality at UNDP. Over to you, Raquel.
Thank you, Vijaya. Thank you so much. And let me first congratulate our colleagues from the Independent Evaluation Office, Isabel and the team, for selecting this topic that is at the core of our gender equality strategy. Special congratulations to our colleagues also from UN Women, to the panelists for the very rich lessons learned and the cases and the reflections. I think, and we were discussing with the team how useful is going to be this report to help us to implement our goals of the gender strategy. And we have established really masculinities as a core priority, but going beyond masculinities to help countries to shift development paradigm and go to the core of the roots of inequalities. So structural changes is where we wanted to help to influence. We are humble here because we are surrounded by evaluation colleagues, and we know that change many times is, first of all, not linear, and many times is at the same time progressive. So one stone after another one. But we have a very good elements in this report to move this agenda. I learned that there is no silver bullet, not one single solution, and the context matters. And this comes also from our experience. As in every context, we need to understand how the narrative, the cultural narrative happens around masculinities and how men are portrayed. So, and attracted also towards the different kind of models of masculinity. So a good example of a nice understanding of this context is a joint work with UN Women, UN Women and UNDP report on conflicting identities, the nexus between masculinities, feminities, and violent extremism in Asia. At the show-ups exactly how relevant it is, the context, and these constructions in the real world. So second, I also learned, and listening to the last panelist even more, how relevant it is expertise on masculinities. and alternative methodologies. This means that we UN agencies need to be equipped with more complex skill sets, and even to create these safe spaces of masculinities and to discuss any cultural dimension of the work on gender equality, we really need expert facilitation as much as any topic that goes and talks about or address complex social issues and power. So I wanted to share kind of 2-3 final reflections before going to the Q&A. First, how important it is the individual level, same institutional level, and targeting institutions. For UNDP, who works on governance, institutions are the pillars of democracies, right? They are in charge of the public delivery. And there are many institutions male-dominated. So for us, at the core of our work is targeting these men across these heavily dominated institutions to shift the internal culture. And we have a good example, some examples coming from our initiative called UNDP Targeting Men, Transforming Masculinities, that made some kind of, it helped us to trigger reflection across country offices, concentrated in institutions. For instance, I can talk about our work on law enforcement agents and local government officials, as we did in Cote d'Ivoire and Zambia, or in Thailand, when we work with the Ministry of Health to integrate masculinities perspective across the mental health learning training package for community health volunteers. But what I wanted to share with you is the core of the flagship that we have at the global level, the UNDP Gender Equality Seal for Public Institutions. This is a certification program working with more than 100 ministries. Many of them, these male-dominated ministries, public finance, Ministry of Finance, economies, working with 227 servants, 1,000 public servants. And we engage with male leaders of these organizations. We provide awareness on masculinity to them. And we also help them, the institutions, to review the dimensions, the structures and policies that are helping to reinforce these dominant masculinities. And we think this is very important too. We need to invest in male champions who want to change the status quo. And we found many of these very, very interesting men are placed across a rank of institutions, including judiciary, directors and ministers. My second point is about the internal dimension of the work on masculinities, how important, and this is what we have already in our gender equality strategy, it is for all of us across UN agencies to improve our organizational culture. And here, I just give you an example how we were able, through another initiative, to mobilize 500 male colleagues to engage and join multidisciplinary gender focal teams across 76 country offices. So we are creating this movement internally, and we also open spaces for them to talk about masculinities, including an internal global conversation that we had on Men for Gender Equality, engaging 39 offices. So, but what is for me maybe the challenge here is that the work cannot be superficial, right? The work is complex, it takes time. It's a long-term engagement where we need to go through. And just to share what we think is going to come for UNDP, for our agenda, first of all, we wanted to continue investing at the individual level connected to the organizational level and creating these safe spaces, meaningful to have meaningful conversations. But we want also to invest in the direction of creating bystanders to ensure that the environment and people, when we cross lines, there is someone flagging positively how this is not acceptable. So the work among peers and creating this peer group approach, we hope it will help to create a safer environment inside our organization. We are going to release a guidance note. That's my last publicity kind of bit. A guidance note meant for gender equality in the workplace, a safe, respectful, and inclusive organizational culture. And we wanted to keep investing on this dimension because we think that when we cannot practice, we cannot really convince outside and across our programs. So we need to walk the talk here. And my third point, and I close, I hope I'm not kind
Please go ahead, Raquel. Can someone mute him, please? Okay, Raquel, go ahead. Point. Sorry. Raquel, can you go ahead and complete your point?
Raquel, you are muted.
Oh, I was unmuted. Oh my God. How I was muted? I didn't touch. Well, it's okay. Let's go. I just wanted to close by saying that being UNDP an agency working on governance, being at the core of our work, we need to understand much better how toxic masculinities affect and influence the erosion of democracies. I believe the work on positive masculinities is fundamental, but we need to understand much better why the narrative of heroes and enemies, or the prevalence of this strong male hierarchy and dominance is attractive, why authoritarianism is attractive. So why it comes together with xenophobia, racism. This is a major problem in our societies. And at some point, it's good that we departure also from the community level work, as the previous panelist said, to understand this full architecture that we see emerging today. Patriarchal norms are really hurting both women and men. And UNDP, we will continue growing in this path as it is deeply connected to the ongoing political struggle for women's rights. So I will close here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raquel, for also sharing what's happening at the UNDP and the efforts that are ongoing and you plan to do in the future. I wish to also thank Isabel for her opening remarks, Taeyong for the excellent presentation, and Chaitali and Rodrigo for sharing insights from UN Women and particularly very practical program examples from the country level. As I open the floor for the discussion, I request all the participants to share your perspectives on promoting positive masculinity and gender transformative practices. Please do share your practical experiences, how you addressed masculinity challenges in your programs. Our office also produced, I would like to share, a reflections paper on gender equality and women's empowerment. I urge you to take a look at that. It also covers very important issues on promoting gender equality and transformative gender agenda. But today we are looking at the issue from masculinity perspective. So do share your lessons and good practices. The reflection paper highlights that we need to understand diverse masculinities. I think Raquel also referred to that. I invite colleagues, particularly from the crisis context, to share your insights because displacement and identity during crisis accentuates toxic masculinity, which has certain specificities from a normal development context. There are issues of militarization and recruitment, which intensifies violent extremism. So how are UN agencies addressing these issues? Also, UN agencies work together on the ground. There are spotlight initiatives and other initiatives where they collaborate. So what are the lessons for joint UN collaborations to address complex challenges of masculinity manifestation that are very disruptive for gender equality and development? I open the floor for discussion. There are already some comments in the chat. I urge colleagues to come up and ask your questions. There's questions from Tina, Michael, Joseph, Tim, and Roger Dorsinibili. So please do come up. First, let me invite Kadjitao Sam for your question. Other colleagues, please do come in. Otherwise, I'll read your questions later. Yes, Sam.
Okay, thank you, Vijaya. My name is Hadija Toussam, and I work for UNDP Country Office Senegal. It's not a question; I want to share my experience. With it was a joint program with UNDP and UN Women in Senegal, and we worked in 5 municipalities. How to introduce masculinity in the local development, and also how to introduce the concept of the masculinity in those how to influence leaders. So we managed to work to have allies with the major and the local municipality members, and we mobilized also the village chief. Sorry, I'm French speaking, so I'm trying to speak in English. So what I'm saying is we tried to mobilize the village chief and to have the sensibilization on this masculinity concept. Also, we mobilized feminine sports, football clubs, to have these communication on how to understand better and to engage men in gender equality. We also have the opportunity to work with university and to provide, to link university practitioners, researchers with what we were doing in the field. And it was quite interesting to find, we have some young men who are engaged, who understand what to do, and they also use the ICT, the IT, the social network to be role models to find how to show to other men they can participate in domestic work, and they also can help women being more engaged in political leadership at local level. So it was quite interesting, and I hope will be part of the next evaluation for this on this thematic, and we have many more to share with others. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kajita, for sharing your experience. I don't see any hand, but there's a question from Tina. Tina, would you like to come in? Are you there? Is there a difference between those who are fathers to girls versus boys? Yes, Tina.
Yes, I was interested in the point that Tae-Young reported from the paper about fathers shifting their views or being a kind of a fertile ground for engaging around gender equality once they've become fathers. So I was wondering if there was a difference between those that are fathers to girls and those that are fathers to boys. And in my head, I was thinking, well, if they are fathers to boys and they are starting to be interested in gender equality issues, this would be really positive, and they would be, essentially caring more about their wives, perhaps. But if they're fathers to girls, it would perhaps be a different motivation, thinking about the next generation, about their girls growing up and being treated equally and so forth. So just kind of some thoughts in my head, and was interested if either Tae-Young or perhaps also the UN Women colleagues have any information on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. And also parents to a father to a boy and a girl. May I ask Chaitali and Rodriguez to come on this, if you have any field level insights on this, on this aspect?
Perhaps, Rodrigo, you are better placed to answer that question.
Yes, thank you. No, it's an interesting question because, I mean, what we know for sure that having an engaged father has a very positive influence on boys. They are really the first role model for boys. So regardless of how, if then the father is, I mean, unfortunately reinforcing gender stereotypes while being more engaged in childcare. What we have been always trying to is to look at also the content and the relationship with the children, both daughters and sons. And we also had explicit contents in the gender transformative parenting programs, but also in the community-based interventions, which, by the way, target over 120,000 men and women in 4 Arab countries. We always pay explicit attention to the gender inequalities of each context of each country, and how parenting and engaged fatherhood can help to overcome those inequalities, as the colleague or mentioned, by empowering daughters, and also by being good role model with boys for them to be engaged on caregiving. And let's also have in mind that fatherhood will not be gender equitable after having a baby. It needs to start before. It needs to start in boys, taking care of siblings, taking care of the elderly, taking care of disabled family members. So we really need to work earlier with boys in order to have gender equitable fathers. I think that's also very important to have in mind. Over.
Thank you, Rodrigo, for sharing that. That's a very interesting question, Tina. Raquel, if you have any insights, please do come in. But I would like to share a short, YouTube kind of videos that are very common in India, which tries to address this issue, how fathers need to, because there are gender social norms and practices which is like ingrained, and how those has to be changed in terms of bringing up daughters and sons, particularly making the sons more responsible in terms of respecting boundaries, respecting the spaces women should have, because if they respect their sisters, they need to respect other women who are not put into difficult situations because of very aggressive male attitudes. So they're very interesting movies where the message is that we are not there to change our daughters, resting them to stay at home, but it's about how we socialize our boys to accept women being in public spaces and respecting their right to be there and right to engage. So some of this is very behavioral, and I don't know which UN agencies are engaging much more on advocacy and having these messages, which will take some time, but it sends home the message. Raquel, do you have any point on that before we move to the next question?
I was already writing in the chat that I apologize, but I need to leave because it's 9:30. But no, I think you made all the points. Thank you. Thank you, Vijaya.
Thanks, Raquel, and thanks for joining. And I think this conversation should continue. This is just the beginning. May I now request Michael Joseph? Michael, would you like to come? Would you like to ask your questions? Michael, I had a question on, are there any insights on different religions, segregation, and their impact? Again, Chaitali and Rodrigo, do you have any experience? Because Chaitali, you shared about engaging faith-based organizations, experience from Ethiopia. Any insights, any response to Michael's question?
Thanks. I think what we observed in case of the Ethiopia evaluation was that, as opposed to the Christianity, the Islamic structure was far more decentralized. So this was one of the perspectives that was shared by the stakeholders, that the Norwegian church, who was actually implementing this program in partnership with UN Women, they reflected that they really had to work at the community at the grassroots level in order to get the religious leader, the Islamic religious leaders on board. Whereas in case of the church, that was far more centralized. So it was easier for them to congregate, to have a discussion around toxic masculinity, address it within their own institutions. Whereas in case of Islam, they really had to sort of go out there to organize them and have a conversation. As far as the religious text is concerned, we didn't come across any specific segregation in terms of differences, about any challenges that they faced to deal with the Islamic narrative vis-a-vis the Christian narrative, at least in case of Ethiopia. But I know that Rodrigo's program does a lot of work in the Arab states to deal with the Islamic narrative and reinterpreting it to promote conversation, at least around gender equality.
Thank you, Chaitali. What I can say in terms, I mean, we never like to compare faiths, and actually we are working on the gender equality issues and men's caregiving now with an interfaith platform in Egypt that was established by the National Council for Women, incorporating men and women actors in both Christian Orthodox faith and Sunni Muslims, and we are incorporating again women because even if women are not priests or imams, they play a role in spreading religious education in schools, in the communities, having circles with women, etc. So, but I have to say that Islam, I feel it's somehow naturally very well positioned for the engagement of imams and sheikhs on issues around caregiving and fatherhood and positive masculinities because they have families themselves. They can be role models. They can speak from the experience. So in other religions where the priest, have the celibacy, they are also perceived or could be perceived in different ways, and they are also not speaking from their own experience. So I think that also makes a difference, I can say, on addressing this work with the different religious actors. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There's a question about how do you go about this issue, particularly when you reach out to the particular populations on home visits by Roger. Any insights on how research is done, how programs are implemented? How do you reach out to the beneficiaries whom you wanted to engage with on this particular issue? I would like the panelists, the presenters to come in, but also the participants can share their insights as well. It need not be always the presenters, but if you have any examples of how you reached out, how you engaged with the community, because this is a very sensitive aspect and you cannot go and just start off like any regular issue. You need to gain the trust, you need to engage them before some of these issues are taken up concretely and engaged on those. Any insights on that? Ritu, would you like to come in?
Yes, sure. This is absolutely very rich conversation. I'm calling from Delhi in India. We have a few examples. One is this is in northeast part of our country where we're working in 90 villages, which was in child health. And my role is actually to train the NGO staff in community-led and behavior change approach, and not as an evaluator there. And it was community-led response to child health. So when we were designing, the evaluation team said that it would be better that why don't you just focus on mothers? That mothers, and for which was very uncomfortable for me, that mothers are responsible for health of their children. That's the message which we are giving. And we said, no, we will focus at village level and what is their dream for health of the children. And that's what we focused on, and not just focusing like what was mentioned earlier, socio-ecological model. I think that is the way, a place-based approach, not focusing on a particular population group. And what happened is that also the second thing I learned, first is this, second is teaching, training, orientation does not lead to behavior change. It's when people recognize it's important to them, and therefore using a strength-based approach like SALT, which people started realizing their own strengths, which gave them a lot of confidence. And then inviting grandmothers, grandfathers, young people, children, mothers and fathers, obviously, and other people in the village to discuss what is your dream for children, for health of the children. And then it became the dream. And as they say, it is the whole village which brings up the child, something like this, yeah. And then community took a lot of actions, and we saw grandfathers, we saw grandmothers, we saw fathers, we saw boys encouraging parents to or themselves taking children for immunization, for example. Earlier, it was just the responsibility of the women. And as this continued, when we were having conversations after about a year or so, it it was so organic that when fathers realized that mothers, the wives, contributed so much, that they started helping in household chores and taking on more responsibilities. So the what you had shared earlier about long-term approach, I think that is very critical. So this is just one example of us combining strength-based approach with masculinities without calling it masculinity. Yeah, I hope this helps. Yeah, I would love to learn more.
Oh, thank you, Ritu. Yeah, this is a very complex topic, and I think all of us are learning. I think it was Rodrigo who talked about pedagogical approaches. I think it's just not as simple as knocking on somebody's door and starting the
Yes.
topic as complex as masculinities and their willingness or engagement to change. So it's much more than that, and it is a process that one has to give a longer term duration, which also the reflection paper talks about. Anybody else who would like to come in on this particular issue and share your lesson?
Vijay, I can quickly talk about it from an evaluation and evidence generation perspective. So to draw from the feminist collaborative evaluation of UN Women's approach to social norms, we really wanted to operationalize the idea of co-creation with the community. Having said that, because the issues around social norms change can be extremely sensitive, particularly if it's around ending violence against women, particularly if it's around toxic masculinity. So I just want to say that we need to invest a lot into the preparatory work for these evaluations. We had constituted at the country level an advisory group where we were, as in the evaluation team, was very much on a listening mode. And we were hearing from them around the power dynamics, about the aspects that we need to be careful about, how the context is constituted, how we need to be careful about not doing more harm and not getting into the trap of reinforcing certain gender stereotypes. So a lot of preparatory work went into it, seeking advice from country-led advisory groups. And then, when we went for data collection, also we had to be extremely well planned to ensure that the power dynamics were well maintained and there was safe space for various stakeholders to talk to us, to communicate to us about the issues around social norms change and what is their perception about the program's effectiveness with regard to social norms change. Has it making any dent into the social norms changes? We also applied to certain extent, where possible, the intergenerational dialogue, trying to bring, as Ritu, you were mentioning, we tried to have a conversation with the younger generation. We tried to have a conversation with the middle generation and the elder generation to understand how they perceive the social norms from an intergenerational perspective. And then only after having those initial rounds of focused data collections and discussions, we were able to bring them together to co-create something. Because if we were to go with the notion of co-creating something on the second day of our data collection, then, I don't think we would have been able to truly co-create something. In fact, we probably would have done more harm to them. So just to reflect that, even from an evaluator's perspective, we need to be very mindful of how we are entering into the space, how we may reinforce certain power hegemonies and end up doing more harm. So we need to be quite cognizant of that. One more thing that we are very careful about is researching with the survivors of violence against women. So we all had to sort of go through the WHO's guidelines of doing research with survivors of violence, survivors of gender-based violence. And actually it was quite handy for us because we did come across cases where we had to manage those sensitivities when we were doing the data collection. So just to say that, yeah, these are very complex issues and we need to hone our skills to be able to be more skilled evaluators to be doing research and evidence generation in these kind of sensitive aspects.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Chaitali and Ritu, for that. There's a question from Rebecca. Rebecca, are you still around? Would you like to ask your question?
Yes. Good morning, colleagues, or good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The question is about from experience, some programs when we implement, like the original documents are in English or French or Spanish. So when it comes to implementations, some local communities, they have their own indigenous languages on how they translate those things. So there is a specific report, without mentioning what it is, some indigenous communities complained about being imposed westernized translation on how they see things. And they said this, in one way or another, it creates conflict on how they see things. And the male societies, male-dominated societies, they stay on defensive mode. They feel like they're being forced, and they feel like there is a competition between women programs coming just to try to compete with them. So I was trying to just hear from colleagues how they deal with this during the implementations. Do they allow local communities to come up with their terminologies? How do they do these things? Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Anybody would like to take this question?
Yeah, can I add? Yeah, thank you so much, Rebecca. It's a very good comment and very relevant, I think, for the Global South. And what we've been doing in the region is often, prioritizing terms of reference documents in Arabic. And then, of course, we need to follow the systems. When it comes to publication, we need to do it either in English or French. But definitely the work at community level needs to be led by community. And what we've been identified as a key success factor is, first, to engage with community-based organizations who already know the community and have some leverage influence, who already understand the needs of community members, who speak their language, and then identify either community animators or positive deviants from the same community. We are not bringing externals, but these are individuals from the same community who speak to other individuals in the community on specific issues. In this case, masculinities and engagement of men in caregiving. And the idea of language is one example, but the other important thing is the concept of family. And we are also less and less working on this individualistic approach. We target individuals, shifting their attitudes, behaviors. No, we need to look at also families as a whole, the same that we speak about, communities and societies as a whole. And actually now we are implementing the unique model that we developed in the last program phase. It has this family approach. So we are targeting families through community animators, and they are we have clusters of families who are influencing other families. So I think this is also very important to have in mind. And definitely this bottom-up approach that Chaitali mentioned, and allowing the communities to find the solutions to their challenges as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Ritu, you had a point on strength-based approach. Would you like to come in?
Yes, yeah, I'm sharing everything from very like experience because I work with communities. So please excuse if my language is not very academic. So what I mean is that I just do not see just men as just supporting gender equality, but also as agents of change themselves. And therefore, they also recognizing they have strengths and they have capacity. And once they start realizing then they also start realizing that the women, children, younger people around them also have those strengths, and this also creates a safe space to share, like example like and we have a local government at village level called panchayat, and we was working with those men, and one man, and just like I just asked him a very strength based question like, what are you proud of? And he shared something he had done when he was like a teenager, and then which showed that he had so his elder brother was one who had been bullying him, and how he was able to challenge his elder brother. And then we had a conversation, and he said that that is when he decided that the only way to take decision or exercise power over, that's the way to do it. And when he said, I got married, I said, I will ensure that my wife has no say, and I'm going to exercise that power. So, and then when he was sharing, that is when he realized that what he had been doing to his wife. And I think that sorry, I'm sharing from a very micro level, but that is the kind of conversations. And when these conversations are held in families, and that is when I see change occurs. And as Rodrigo said, I think we've kind of need to, family as an institution, we need to focus more, because that is where power of in South Asia, like joint families, power exercised by the mother-in-law and father-in-law and other older men. So this is my learning, that when we spur that change in one family and connect families. I think that is what Rodrigo was saying. And there is this latest book, Fragile Neighborhoods by Sam Kaplan. He talks about that fragile neighborhoods and how we have to connect families with each other. I hope it helps.
Thank you, Ritu. Rebecca, also to your question, I think the language should be local, and any of these concepts we use more at the academic level, program level, need to be actually translated into the local language, how it resonates with the people. So even concepts like LNOB, unless it's translated into a language people can relate to, I think we cannot have impact of what we intend to do. So it is local language, definitely. There's a question from Maria Luisa. Maria, are you there? Maria Luisa? From UN Human Rights Office, would it be possible for you to share the this is the presentation. Okay, it's only about the presentation. I don't see any questions. If I may ask lastly, on the conflict context, did you find any new challenges? Can any participant share any insights? Otherwise, I think we can wrap up from very quick reflections from half a minute, 1 minute reflection from the presenters. Okay, I don't see anything. Can we start with you, Chaitali? Your final observations.
So I can talk from the context of a protracted crisis, that's Jordan. What we observed when we did the portfolio evaluation of Jordan Country Office, portfolio evaluation of UN Women, was that UN Women has a fairly comprehensive program with the Syrian refugees and those who are settled in the camp. And UN Women has created like safe space where the idea is that the targeted refugee women and children could come. Women are trained on certain entrepreneurial and other kind of, work skills that potentially they could sort of apply to gain, meaningful employment. There were also protection-related issues within that safe compound, where they were given GBV-related referral services. But what we observed was two things. First, some of these programs unintentionally tend to reinforce the gender stereotypical ways of working or skills, such as, we tend to go for very predictable skills such as tailoring, hairdressing, sewing, without necessarily listening to the constituency that some of them are interested in IT-related skills or something that, they have a natural inclination towards, or even their educational background. So and this is not only in case of UN Women, I think by and large, in the case of, crisis and cash for work related interventions, we tend to fall back towards more stereotypical, gender occupational skills. The second thing that we observed was, and we do highlight it in our evaluation, that the engagement of men was very scattered and sporadic. And they were also, interestingly, absorbed in the program to do very gender stereotypical work, which is they were the male guards of those safe spaces, So we recommended that, these programs need to have a much more systematic approach towards engaging men, because some of these women who were stepping out from being predominantly a home or caretaker are getting into an economic productive employment space, and that is not really going down well with the institution of family and the men, their husbands or any other sort of paternal figure. So some of them, were unexpectedly, subjected to different kinds of violence. So it's important, even in the context of an active crisis or protracted crisis, to ensure that the male members of the family and the community are made a part of our interventions, even if we don't have concrete things to offer to them, but at least they should be a part of the conversation. They should be made part of the journey that we are undertaking.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chaitali. Taeyong, any closing remarks from you?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for all the participants and our excellent speakers. I personally learned a lot with Anna Kunova on behalf of IEO for doing this paper as well. So thank you to everyone, and again, advertising for other reflections papers that's upcoming. So please join us for those webinars as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Rodrigo, your final comments?
Thank you. I don't really have final comments. I think it's really been a pleasure, and it's very exciting also for us to have the opportunity to share what we know, but also to learn from others. And I just wanted to say again what I mentioned, that we are UN Women corporately is going to launch soon the strategy on social norms that we've been developing in the last 2 years after a lot of consultations. It's a very transformative and distinct approach to address social norms. And the work on transforming patriarchal masculinities is also the principles that, have been guiding our work are really something that we've been utilizing in our programming, and speak about transforming and being intentional again on making the lives of women and girls better, and also the lives of men and boys better and more meaningful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rodrigo. I wish to thank you all for participating today. There's a lot of information shared in the chat. Anna Kunova, a colleague, shared the link to the reflections paper, and also the previous one, which was mentioned by Isabel and myself, Gender Equality and SDG Accelerator paper. Please do take a look. There's an excellent paper as well. There's also information shared by IAC on gender equality seal for public institutions. That's an information. And Ana Garaggio shared an interesting link to the book on boy moms. So there's quite a bit in the chat as well. Do take a look. And thanks so much for participating today in this very interesting discussion. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
And bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.